You are listening to another edition of Black Report Radio with the People's Minister of Information, J.R. Valrey. Today, our honored guest is Gabriella Castillo. She is the second secretary in the political office of the Cuban Embassy. How are you?
Really good. Thank you, JR, for inviting me today.
Well, thank you for coming on to basically clear up a lot of this misdirected propaganda that's coming out over mainstream media in the United States. First thing, Cuba, since the Cuban Revolution, has had a very tumultuous relationship with the United States government. Can you describe the difference between an embargo and a blockade and Cuba's history with the United States in that regard?
Basically, many people here in the United States and around the world call what the United States has with us an embargo. And it's actually wrong because an embargo will be a specific sanction, a measure against a country that doesn't comply with a specific thing or a specific treaty between two countries. That will be an embargo. The prohibition of something, of doing trade with one country, with the country imposing the embargo, that will be the embargo. But what we have is a blockade. Why is that a blockade? Because the policies that compound or are part of these measures are aimed to isolate, asphyxiate, cut, close any kind of relation of Cuba, not only with the United States, but also with third countries. The blockade is basically something that is a very comprehensive group of measures, executive actions, even if it has the component of media with all the campaigns of misinformation surrounding our country. But basically, there are three laws that establish what a blockade against Cuba is. The first is the Torricelli Act, which is a sanction which sanctions third nations for having trade relations with Cuba. Also, there is the Helms-Burton Act, which is the negative of any financial institution around the world to give credit to Cuba because it's sanctioned by the United States. And there is also the third one would be the list of safe sponsors of terrorism, which includes with wrong justification our country in a list that imposes economical measures against our country and doesn't allow Cuba to have normal relations, trade relations, not only with the United States, but also with the rest of the world, and attacks the main sources of income of our country, like tourism, our capability of buying fuel to generate electricity in our country. So you see, JR, this is not an embargo, this is a blockade because it has a very comprehensive approach and it doesn't aim to only one thing or something that our country hasn't complied. It just aims against the Cuban people and the Cuban sovereignty.
Recently, the United States government has been implementing a war against immigrants, especially from countries, be it Nicaragua, Venezuela, Haiti, and Cuba, all who have a history of fighting the United States in revolutionary wars in their countries. Can you talk a little bit about what is going on currently with immigration status with the Cuban people, but in regards to the Cubans being grouped with the Nicaraguans, Venezuelans, and the Haitians? What is happening with the immigration programs coming out of those countries, but specifically in regards to Cuba?
So specifically regarding to Cuba, you need first to understand that the issue of migration with my country has been historically politicized here in the United States, and mainly by politicians from Florida. So the migration from Cuba, we consider migration as a right for every people that wants to do it and have the right to do it legally and in a proper way and being received in the country where they're going to with their rights protected. But with Cuba specifically, it has been used as a weapon, a political weapon against my country, because mainly the economical reasons why people in Cuba migrate to the United States is because of consequence of the blockade against my country. But what they say is that those people that migrate from Cuba to the United States, they are doing it because they are fleeing Cuba because of political reasons. But the fact is that even those politicians in Florida that have this kind of speech in their political arguments had to recognize in the past the fact that those people are here in the United States, come here to the United States, and 1 year after, they just want to return to Cuba to see their families because as any other immigrant in the world, they are just traveling, they just going to other countries in order to improve their economical situation. So specifically with Cuba right now, the biggest issue is what they call the humanitarian parole, which was a specific program for Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Haiti that was established during the Biden administration. So the parole was something that was seized by the Trump administration on April 24th. And what it means to have an humanitarian parole for a Cuban is that they give you this humanitarian parole for specific reasons. One of them was health issues. Other one was family reunification here in the United States. Other were the people here in the United States said that they were fleeing Cuba because of political reasons, because, as I said, it's used as a political weapon against my country. But in order to obtain this humanitarian parole, which is a special condition for migrants from Cuba, they needed to have a sponsor here in the United States. I mean, someone living here in the United States, have a passport, own a passport, and also have enough money for buying a plane ticket in order to travel to the United States. And it was something that was reviewed case by case here in the United States. And also the other benefit from the pool was the fact that they were able, once they were here in the United States, they were able to apply for a job here in the United States legally until their migration situation was regularized here in the United States. But this was a special condition established for Cubans here in the United States and those other countries that I just mentioned. And the thing that is kind of not funny but strange for me, personally speaking, is the fact that they established supposedly, allegedly, this parole because there was political conditions in Cuba that it was necessary to establish a special condition for those Cubans coming here. And right now they are stopping this parole, saying that those people can just return to their countries, return to Cuba, because Cuba has all the conditions in order to receive them. We do have the conditions, but I don't know if you see the contradiction in the first statement saying that Cuba is a dictatorship, so they cannot be in their own country, so they have to flee to the United States. But now they're stopping this program inside all the migration policies that are now going on here in the United States and just saying, okay, so your country is fit to receive you. So are we a dictatorship or not? So this is the kind of things that you find in this political speech against my country. It's the same thing with terrorism. We were in the list of state sponsors of terrorism, but during Biden administration, we had counterterrorism talks with the government of the United States. So,
can you give us a brief history of the Cuban medical brigades? What are the Cuban medical brigades and how were they formed?
Okay, so the Cuban Medical Brigades is a program that we have mainly with countries in Africa and in the Caribbean and in Latin America. They have a history of more than 30 years. We are in more than 53 countries in Africa right now. And it was one of the ways that our country found to present solidarity with developing countries around the world based on what we know as South-South cooperation instead of the other imperialist and capitalist alternatives that you have around the world. But it's not only the presence of Cuban doctors in those countries, but it's also the creation of medicine faculties in those countries, sharing technology related to biotechnology and medicine with those countries, also establishing agreements with those countries to receive students from those countries in the Latin American School of Medicine in Cuba, where they can study medicine for free, and with the only commitment when they return to their countries of origin to work in their communities once they are there. So, as I said, it's a program that has been there for more than 30 years for our country, and is one of the things that are being more attacked right now by the government of the United States, specifically by the State Department, Secretary Marco Rubio, and some advisors from the White House. Why is this program being under attack right now? They're saying that Cuba and those countries that have Cuban doctors that work mainly in vulnerable communities in those countries with people that otherwise, if they don't have the Cuban doctors, they won't be able to have access to health care in their countries where they live. So basically, they are attacking an issue of global health that has the support of the International Health Organization, and they are attacking because Most of those countries don't pay. We established a contract with them, but they don't pay the government of Cuba for the services of their doctors. They provide payment for the doctors. They provide housing for those doctors. I mean, places to stay and to work in the communities, but they don't pay money to the government of Cuba. But some of those countries, in their contracts, the specific contracts, because the contracts that we do with the countries one by one is not a program for all the countries. It's specific agreements for each country where we have Cuban doctors. Some of them do pay for the presence of Cuban doctors there. And the money that we receive from that, the percentage of the money that we receive from the presence of Cuban doctors in those countries is dedicated to the healthcare system in Cuba and also for other things that are necessary in the country, like buying medicine, like buying food, because right now we are having a very hard economical situation in Cuba. So right now the government of the United States, and for many, many years has been like that, they are attacking any source of income that Cuba has. And one of them is precisely the agreements and the contracts that we have with some countries that pay for the presence of the Cuban doctors there. It has been proven by those countries that the agreements are made regarding the international laws, the specific laws in those countries, the work laws in Cuba. And also the people that are attacking the collaboration, the medical collaboration that Cuba has, are also attacking this because it is one of the things that we feel most proud, and it's the way that we as a country from the diaspora return what we think we owe, in the best way of saying this, I mean, what we think we owe to Mother Africa. And it goes in the same line as the Cuban participation in the liberation fights in Africa, the liberation, the fight against apartheid, you know, when we're in Angola, when we're in Namibia, when we're in Ethiopia. So it is a way to attack source of income from our country, but mostly, more than the source of income from our country, is attacking the prestige of Cuba in medicine, what we have achieved despite being a developing country, a country subjected measures of maximum pressure against by the United States. We have achieved so much, and we feel so proud of that. And it's part of the dialogue that we have with the countries from the South, and it's part of our work of what we feel as a different way of collaboration between developing countries in the world.
Who are some of the countries that are receiving medical brigade aid from the Cuban government? And how is Marco Rubio and the Trump administration attacking the Cuban Medical Brigade? I understand that they've implemented sanctions, but can you go into what that means and how that will affect the Cuban Medical Brigade around the world?
Okay, so first, I was saying that we have, in more than 53 countries in Africa, we have medical brigades, and also in the Caribbean and in Latin America. In Africa specifically, we have doctors in South Africa, we have doctors in Botswana, we have doctors in Zimbabwe, we have doctors in Angola. I mean, the list is really, really long. We have doctors in the Caribbean, we have doctors in Jamaica, we have doctors in Bahamas. In Latin America, we are in Venezuela, we are in Nicaragua, we were in Brazil for many, many years. And the most important thing is when you speak with people that their lives has been impacted by the presence of the medical brigades in their countries, they always say that they trust in the Cuban doctors, and that if the Cuban doctors were in their countries, they wouldn't have access to a proper healthcare system. And what are the specific measures that have been mentioned by the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio? So they're saying they're putting sanctions against Cuban officials that are related to the medical brigades. When I say Cuban officials related to the medical brigades, I'm talking of the health secretary in Cuba, also the doctors in Cuba that from Cuba coordinate those medical brigades in my country. So Cuban officials, it could be even the Cuban president, Miguel Díaz-Canel. And also they say that they are imposing sanctions against officials in the countries where the Cuban doctors are. And the sanction is that they are not going to give visas to those officials in order to travel to the United States. And so far, there have been many statements made by leaders, mostly from the Caribbean, but also from Africa, saying that they rather lose their visas to travel to the United States than to finish the medical corroboration with Cuba. Okay, so they preferred because they recognize the quality of the Cuban doctors and also the legal way and the proper way where we establish this work relation and the contracts with the doctors that are in their countries. My English is not very good. I don't know if I was able to explain myself, but it's basically that.
I got it.
Mm-hmm.
You were doing well.
Thank you.
Well, I want to just thank you for your time and giving us this brief update as to what is going on between the United States government under the administration of Donald Trump and also Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and what's going on with Cuba and what they're trying to do to crush Cuban sovereignty and what Cuba has going on in its socialist revolution. So I want to thank you, Ms. Gabriella Castillo, the second secretary in the political office of the Cuban Embassy. We appreciate you. And, this is the first interview, but not the last, hopefully.
Thank you, JR. Thank you for the opportunity of being here today with you.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.